The Ohio sun hung high over Brookfield, an affluent neighborhood where every lawn was a testament to meticulous care, where streets were wide and quiet, save for the rhythmic cadence of morning joggers' feet against the pavement. The houses were elegant but not ostentatious, the kind of homes where people waved politely to neighbors but seldom intruded beyond surface-level pleasantries. Police cruisers patrolled these streets, but their presence was largely symbolic. Crime here was a stranger, an unwelcome visitor who rarely lingered. Sergeant Brian Calloway navigated his patrol vehicle down one of those pristine roads, his left hand resting on the wheel, his right absent-mindedly grazing the radio. 20 years in the force had made him a man of instinct. He trusted those instincts. They had carried him through countless arrests, diffused volatile situations, and earned him a reputation, tough, no-nonsense, unwavering. He saw the world in clean, distinct lines, right and wrong, belonging and not belonging. Then he saw her. A woman in her mid-40s, toned with a confident stride, moving along the sidewalk in steady, unhurried rhythm. Black leggings hugged her athletic frame, and a sleek tank top clung to her shoulders, dampened slightly from exertion. Her earbuds were firmly in place, isolating her in a world of her own. To anyone else she was just another jogger. But Calloway felt a prickling unease, a whisper of suspicion crawling up his spine. He didn't have proof, but he didn't need it. Most people acknowledged a patrol car when it passed, a slight nod, a momentary glance. But she didn't. She ran past a silver Tesla in a driveway without a second look. Did she just come from there? Was she scouting? Calloway had made too many arrests to believe in coincidences. He pulled the cruiser to the curb, the tires crunching softly against the pavement as he stepped out. His posture was relaxed but deliberate. One hand resting on his belt, fingers just close enough to his holster to be noticed. She slowed, yanking out an earbud, her breathing even, measured. "Something wrong, officer?" Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Not fear, awareness. "Where you coming from?" Calloway's voice was steady, edged with the quiet authority honed over years of interrogations. She blinked, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face before she answered. "Home. Just out for a run." "Where's home?" She tilted her head slightly, a subtle shift in her expression. "A couple blocks down. You got ID on you?" The air changed. It was barely perceptible, but Calloway noticed. A tension, a tightening of her posture. He'd seen it before. Resistance. A refusal to cooperate. For what? The question irked him more than it should have. He squared his shoulders. "Just need to make sure everything checks out." She let out a sharp breath, hands on her hips. "You stopped me for jogging in broad daylight because you think I'm a threat." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She scoffed, reaching for her phone. "You know what? Let's just call someone who actually enforces the law correctly." Calloway stepped forward, measured but firm. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. Show me some identification." Her fingers tightened around the phone. Calloway noticed. To him it was escalation. "I'm not required to carry ID while jogging." Her voice was steady, but Calloway heard the defiance. "That's so?" She held his gaze. "That's so." Calloway exhaled, shifting his stance. "I'm investigating suspicious activity." "What activity?" The question landed like a slap. He hadn't expected pushback. He hesitated just briefly. "You were running past a home with a high-value vehicle in the driveway." She laughed. "No humor, just disbelief. You mean the Tesla? So now jogging past a parked car is a crime?" Calloway's jaw tightened. "You're refusing to identify yourself." "I'm refusing to be harassed." That word, harassed, sent a slow burn through Calloway's chest. It was an accusation, a challenge, a direct shot at his authority, his judgment. He took a step closer. "You're resisting my investigation." She didn't flinch. "I'm resisting nothing. You're abusing your badge, and you know it." Her hand twitched near her phone again. Calloway didn't think. He reacted. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. The shift was instant. Words dissolved into action. Her breath hitched, her body stiffening as he twisted her arm behind her back. The cuffs were out before she could process what was happening. "What the hell?" she barked, struggling against his grip. You're under arrest for obstruction." His voice was automatic, detached. A porch creaked. A phone was raised. A camera lens captured everything. Across the street a woman watched, frozen, her mouth slightly parted in horror. "You're making a mistake," the woman gritted out, her wrists now secured in steel. Calloway ignored her, ignored the weight of eyes on him. "Dispatch, I have a 10:15 male suspect, refused to identify, sending for transport." A chuckle, dry and amused. "You really think this is going to go your way?" Before he could retort, another voice sliced through the thick air. "Excuse me, officer, what's going on here?" A man in his 50s, well-dressed with a quiet authority that demanded attention. He wasn't just another bystander. "Sir, please stand back." Calloway's voice was firm but slightly off balance. The man ignored him, eyes shifting between the woman and the cuffs binding her wrists. Then back to Calloway. "I asked what's going on." She was being uncooperative. The man's head tilted. Uncooperative? She refused to comply with an investigation. The woman spoke before the man could respond. "He stopped me while I was jogging, asked for ID. I told him I didn't need to carry one, and now, here we are." The man turned fully to Calloway, and in that moment, the sergeant felt something shift. The weight of the air around him changed. Calloway had made the biggest mistake of his career. The man standing in front of him isn't afraid. A black SUV pulls up, its tinted windows and unmarked plates making it clear that whoever is inside has power. Calloway knows that kind of vehicle. It doesn't belong to just anyone. The driver's door swings open, and out steps Captain Ronald Briggs, Calloway's commanding officer. His face is thunderous, his stride purposeful. The crowd instinctively parts as he approaches, his gaze locked onto Calloway. The tension is suffocating. Calloway straightens, trying to maintain control, but something is off. His instincts, so reliable until now, scream at him that this moment is different. Briggs stops just a few feet away, his eyes flicking between Calloway and Simone, who still stands in cuffs. His jaw tightens, and then he speaks, his voice a low command. "Uncuff her." Calloway blinks. He must have misheard. "Sir?" Briggs steps forward. "I said uncuff her, now." Calloway hesitates. This doesn't make sense. His boss is ordering him to release a suspect. He swallows hard, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Briggs turns to Simone, his voice softer, regretful. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Are you hurt?" Simone shakes her head, slow and deliberate. "I'm fine." Calloway's stomach sinks. Something is very, very wrong. Briggs exhales through his nose before turning back to Calloway, his voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "Do you even know who you just put in handcuffs?" The street is silent. Calloway swallows hard, his grip on the cuffs loosening slightly. "Sir, she refused to identify herself." Briggs steps even closer, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the full weight of his authority. "That's because she doesn't have to." The SUV. The way everyone is watching. The way Briggs isn't just mad. He's furious. Simone watches Calloway carefully. When she speaks, her voice is controlled but sharp. "My name is Chief Simone Daniels." Calloway stops breathing. She lets it sit, lets him process. Then she adds, her tone like a blade against his pride. "And you just arrested your boss." The words land like a hammer to his chest. His mouth goes dry. He feels the weight of every pair of eyes on him, the cameras still recording, the neighbors whispering. The moment is collapsing in on him, but it isn't over. Not yet. Calloway freezes. Chief Simone Daniels, his boss. The woman he humiliated in broad daylight, treated like a suspect, like a threat, is the highest-ranking officer in the department. The realization slams into him like a tidal wave. Briggs' voice shatters the silence. "I said uncuff her, now." Calloway doesn't hesitate this time. His hands fumble slightly as he unlocks the cuffs, stepping back as Simone rubs her wrists. The red marks left behind make his stomach turn. The crowd remains silent, but the tension crackles in the air. Phones are still recording. The man in the suit watches, his expression unreadable, but something in his gaze makes Calloway's skin prickle with shame. Simone takes a deep breath. She's composed, but there's an edge in her eyes that he can't ignore. She rolls her shoulders before facing him directly. You think your badge gives you the right to stop whoever you want? Her voice isn't loud, but it cuts through the air like a scalpel. You think jogging while black is a crime? Calloway opens his mouth, then closes it. He has nothing. No justification, no excuse that won't sound weak. Simone tilts her head, watching him. I watched you make a decision today. I watched you decide that I didn't belong here. You didn't know who I was, and that was all you needed to see me as a suspect. Calloway shifts his weight, his face burning, but he can't look away. Simone steps closer, lowering her voice just for him. You put your hands on me. You humiliated me. You were ready to throw me in the back of a squad car over nothing, and if I were anyone else, if I weren't in this uniform, you know exactly how this could have ended. Calloway swallows hard, his hands twitch at his sides. She leans in slightly, her words hitting like a sledgehammer. How many others have you done this to? That question lands deeper than anything else, because the answer isn't zero. Briggs steps in, voice firm. Sergeant Calloway, you're relieved of duty until further notice. Hand over your badge and gun. The words sting. Calloway's fingers hover over his belt, his pride warring with reality. The moment stretches, thick with unspoken weight. Slowly, he unclips his badge. He places it in Briggs' waiting palm, then his sidearm. His heart hammers, but he forces his face to stay neutral. Simone watches him for a long moment. There's no satisfaction in her expression, no smugness. Just quiet, heavy disappointment. She exhales, shaking her head. You need to take a long, hard look at yourself, Sergeant, because after today, everything changes. Calloway doesn't respond. What could he possibly say? The weight of his choices presses down on him as he steps away. The cameras are still rolling, the crowd is still whispering. But what haunts him most isn't losing his badge, it's the realization that today he didn't just make a mistake, he exposed himself. And there's no coming back from that. He sits in his car, staring at the steering wheel. The engine is off. His hands rest on his lap, fingers slightly curled as if they still remember the weight of the cuffs. His badge and gun are gone. His career hangs by a thread. The air feels thick, suffocating. He finally looks up, watching the neighborhood unfold in front of him. The same quiet street, the same trimmed hedges, the same houses that looked so normal just an hour ago, but now everything feels different. He watches as Chief Simone Daniels stands near her SUV talking to Briggs. Her body language is controlled, but there's fire in her eyes. He sees the way the bystanders watch her, not as a suspect, not as a threat, but as a leader. The weight of what he did settles deep in his gut. For the first time in years, Calloway isn't sure of himself. He prided himself on being a man of the law. He believed he was fair, that he only acted when necessary, that his instincts were always right. But today his instincts were wrong, and it cost him everything. Briggs finally finishes talking and heads toward his own vehicle. Simone turns, locking eyes with Calloway through his windshield. She holds his gaze for a long moment, then slowly shakes her head just once before climbing into her SUV and pulling away. Calloway watches the taillights disappear. His chest feels tight. He exhales, gripping the steering wheel. A year ago, he would have found a way to justify what happened, would have convinced himself that he was right, that she was just another person making a scene. But now he doesn't know. And that's what scares him the most.